Good morning, and another meditation on facing evil, looking at how Jesus faced evil in the desert. Now, in the Gospels, I'm basing this on Matthew's Gospel, Jesus is magically transported from the wilderness to Jerusalem, placed on the highest pinnacle of the temple, very high up, and challenged to throw himself off. Why? What's the purpose? Well, the hint is, I think, in what Satan says, if you are the Son of God. And then he quotes Psalm 91, which says that basically the angels of God will protect his feet. Now, Psalm 91 is one of those very encouraging, positive psalms that tells you that if you give God all your love and loyalty, he'll love and be loyal to you. And one of the things he'll do is guard your way, protect you. It's a promise that wholehearted worshippers will get help from God. He'll protect us from nasty accidents. Psalm 91 is often quoted as a sort of blessing, even though 1,000 fall to your left and your right, you will not be affected. But it's not a promise that the angels will catch us if we jump off high buildings. It's a promise that we might be protected from nasty pitfalls. But Satan is suggesting that if you read Psalm 91, God looks after people who worship him. And obviously Jesus is meant to be the Son of God. Well, if even ordinary believers get that kind of help and protection, surely the Son of God gets even more. So jump off the building and God will make sure that you don't get hurt. So it seems to be a temptation to prove that Jesus is the Son of God. But who's he meant to be proving it to? Is he meant to be proving it to himself, dealing with any residual doubts that Jesus might have? Is he trying to prove it to Satan, to show that Satan shouldn't be such a rebellious character? Or is it showing it to the people in the temple? Well, I think given the fact that Jesus has been transported to the temple and it's described as being in the holy city, I'm tending to think that the idea here is prove it to the people. Prove it to the Israelites, the Jews, that you really are the Son of God. And what a great proof it would be. At the temple, remember there were people at the temple day and night. There were always people in the temple. So if Jesus decides to jump off the highest pinnacle, it would be noticed. And if instead of landing splat at the bottom, the angels kind of bear him up, that would be pretty impressive. So I think that's the idea. Satan is inviting Jesus, to put it simply, to make a name for himself. And the reason I use that expression, make a name for himself, is because that's one of the things that crops up in the early chapters of Genesis all the time. People are trying to make a name for themselves. I think perhaps in particular the prophecy of Malachi 3:1 is in the devil's view, because it was a very popular prophecy at the time of Jesus. Malachi chapter 3 verse 1 says this: I will send my messenger who will prepare the way before me. Then suddenly the Lord you are seeking will come to his temple. The messenger of the covenant whom you desire will come, says the Lord Almighty. Well, God has sent his messenger. John the Baptist has done his work. What's due next? The Lord is meant to suddenly appear in his temple. And Satan has put Jesus on the highest point of that temple and said, here's your chance, make a grand entrance, begin your public ministry with a bang. But Jesus' answer is, you shall not tempt the Lord your God. You shall not tempt the Lord your God. Is that, as a quotation of course from Deuteronomy, And it's a reference back to the time at Massah in the desert, where both the people of Israel tempted God, but also Moses and Aaron in their way tempted God. Is he saying to Satan, you should not tempt your God? Jesus is God. You're tempting him. Or it may be that Jesus is refusing to test God himself. He won't test the Father by seeing whether or not God will save him when he jumps off the pinnacle. But I think the real point of this story is not the conversation between Satan and Jesus. Satan is wrong all the time. He's mixed up. He's a liar. But what I think he's tempting Jesus to do here is not simply to tempt God, but to make a spectacle. And that's what Jesus is also refusing to do. He's saying, I won't tempt my Father, but I won't use this method to make a name for myself. I think that egotism, that desire to be the centre, is a large part of the problem of human sin. It's the desire to make a name for themselves that led to an awful lot of the crimes in the stories of Genesis 1 to 11. It begins with the mighty men of renown, who may or may not be the Nephilim in Genesis chapter 6. The mighty men of renown, it literally means the men of great names. They've made a name for themselves. And the violence, the reign of violence which follows, ends with the flood. After the flood you have Nimrod, the hunter, the great empire builder, making a name for himself, a name which made him famous throughout the Eastern world. And of course the men of Babel, they want to build their tower. Why? To make a name for themselves. There is something there about the desire for fame, and that's linked to the desire for dominance, which is profoundly sinful. And Jesus won't play that game. He hasn't come to exalt himself in that way. He's not going to dominate his followers with spectacular miracles. In fact, he's come as a servant to save us, rather than as a lord to rule us. He's not just looking for obedience, he's also looking for love. And that's why Jesus refused to do the signs and wonders that were demanded of him by the Jews. Jesus is not going to subject you to his rule by an act of spectacle or superior power. Let me just remind you of a little bit from Matthew 12:38 onwards. Then some of the Pharisees and teachers of the law said to him, Teacher, we want to see a sign from you. He answered, A wicked and adulterous generation asks for a sign, but none will be given it, except the sign of the prophet Jonah. For as Jonah was 3 days and nights in the belly of a huge fish, so the Son of Man will be 3 days and nights in the heart of the earth. You want a sign? You want a miracle? Well, here's your sign. A death, a burial, and a resurrection. That's the sign that Jesus is going to perform in Jerusalem. Not jumping off a high place and coming gently to earth. He's not going to do a death-defying leap. He's going to die. And he's going to rest in a grave in Jerusalem. So that's why Jesus won't jump off the temple roof as far as I'm concerned. He's not going to play the game of spectacle, of impressive miracles designed to subjugate. What Jesus is going to do is rule from the cross, rule from the grave. and after his resurrection, rule from heaven. Anyway, that's how Jesus faces evil and does something better. God bless you, and that's all for today.